Hello, stars. I'm back. I'm Center Stars channel, Chris Baird, and we're gonna step back from Hollow Earth for a minute, and we're gonna talk about one of my discoveries. Okay, I need to cover a couple things. In the last video, I said Abel slew Cain, and I know that Cain slew Abel. I'm dyslexic, so I made a mistake on the last video, so I'm just correcting that. Also, I wanted to mention when I was talking about the center star and those findings, my friend Stefan Sindoni, he's the one that helped me with that. We were having a conversation about the center star and needing to prove how it worked, and he brought up the idea of an air conditioning system. And I got to thinking about it and thought about the secondary polar vortex coming down to the poles and cooling it underneath that 400-degree temperature top to bottom, and creating that magnetism that we need to have the magnetic cores. So magnetic field of Earth. Because anything hotter than that, you start to lose the molecular structure and the symmetry of the alignment of atoms, and so you can't get that when you have a solid Earth, because it would be under so much heat and pressure at the center that we couldn't have a magnetic field. That's one of the problems that scientists have been trying to solve for eons, and lately their latest public idea is that there's an ocean underneath the planet cooling the center core, which is in part truth, but it's just another takeaway from the whole thing. So I'm here to talk to you about some different finds that I have. First off, I want to mention Bradley Chester, who has the group Real UFO Sightings, Strange Phenomenon on Facebook, and he sent me a picture of excuse me, I've been under the weather the last couple days, of the lunar surface, and in a crater is what looks like the hip leg portion down to just above the ankle of a Titan in remains. So it's got the hip, the dislocated knee, and the two lower leg bones separated with flesh, and that is in the thumbnail of today's picture. Since he sent that to me, I wanted to give him a shout out. He gave me permission to. Also, in our thumbnail, we have a picture that Terry Hagen sent me that has on one side a Titan with his fist into his chin, arm dislocated, in a saddle pommel with a round handle saddle. On the other side of the island, you can't see him. He's encased in rock. But on the other side of the island, people have pointed out that the front of the island looks like the head of a dragon. So that was Terry Hagen. I also want to mention Roger Spur. He is the father of Mudfossil research, which is the look into petrified remains of giants and titans and other. And where that comes from is, if you aren't aware, there's a thing called dino mummies. And dino mummies are petrified flesh in rare conditions where they are instantly buried, and usually in a water pocket of some sort that keeps it from decaying. We found ships at the bottom of certain seas and lakes of water that have not rotted for the same reason, and they're slowly petrifying themselves. So that starts to get us into what I'm going to talk about today. Hollow Tiamat. Now, Zechariah Sitchin, a lot of people call him Zachariah, but it's an E. Zechariah Sitchin proposed that a planetary body named Marduk came in and hit Tiamat and broke it. Part of Tiamat shot into God knows where, according to him, and the rest formed Earth in the asteroid belt. But it is my contention that Tiamat was hollow, and that we have evidence for that, and that it formed all of the inner planets, because we're finding mud fossil type remains on Mars, limbs and things in craters on the moon, and all over the face of Earth. So, what was Marduk? Marduk is mentioned by the Hopi Indians as well as the red Katchina. And what that is the Hopi blue star prophecy says that there's a blue, like neutron star, followed by a red destructive planet of iron with debris around it that would rain down on the surface of Earth, causing mass destruction. And so they would retreat into the city of the ant people, who I'll get into later throughout this series. But essentially, they traded salt from the surface for gold from the ant people who lived in intercrustal Earth, which I simplified on this drawing of Tiamat as in the crust, but not completely down to the mantle yet. And the ant people could very well be a dino species, an advanced dino species, because think about that they were on the face of the planet for a lot longer than humans have been, okay? And they possibly retreated into the ground, and then they survived the destruction of the planet with the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. And they were in there so long they lost skin pigment, and if they had feathers, which a lot of dinosaurs do, they lost their feathers as well. Okay? So they're only able to come out at night, and these might be our gray reptilian aliens. Okay? There are other people that say that the moon was a life raft and that the grays came from there. So, 50% one hand, 50% the other. You decide for yourself. I'm leaning more towards the dino species, and I believe they built a lot of our megalithic structures. Not all of them. Some of them are remnants and ruins of Tiamat. So, what is Tiamat? Tiamat was the planet that was in the asteroid belt, and it was super massive. And that's actually the norm, believe it or not. When we look for planets outside of our solar system, we do find planets of extraordinary size in the quote-unquote habitable region, and we rarely find smaller planets like Earth in that range. We do find them. It's not impossible to find them. It's just rare. So it's my thinking that the norm is that you have a very large planet near the sun, and then you have smaller large planets extending out beyond that, or even bigger ones. But it's rare to have small inner planets, okay, unless something has come along and impacted the planet. And that's exactly what's described here. So in the Hopi Blue prophecy, we have the blue Katchina followed by the red Katchina, the destroyer that will pepper the earth in meteorites and has 3 times in their oral history. Now, what was Marduk? Marduk was a planet, and it was one of 2 planets in this system that's orbits our sun in our star cluster. To better explain that, we have lots of solar systems that are orbiting close to each other and far away from each other within our star cluster. And in this case, this one blue neutron star with 2 planets, Marduk and Nibiru, orbit our sun. And on 12/21/2012, what that was is our sun goes in a long elliptical orbit up and down below the galactic plane of our galaxy. Meaning that on 12/21/2012, we were at the point where we crossed over that galactic plane and we actually started entering the age of Aquarius. And on that day, if you were to look out, we would be even with the purple haze of the spirals of our galaxy. And now we're cruising above it or below it, no matter what you think, and we're moving further away from that center. And in a long time, we'll orbit back down underneath and come back out again. Okay? So that's what 2012 was all about. And that was the Mayan calendar saying that we were resetting and going into the next phase of the solar orbit. A lot of people speculated that we would have massive earthquakes around here. And that's another thing. When planets semi-align, and what I mean by semi-align is we might have a planet here, 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 on the plane of our solar system. Sometimes we get earthquakes. And recently, all of our planets have been on one side of the sun. And in the last couple of weeks during this time, we had an 8.2 earthquake in Fiji, another one in South America that was a 7.2, and supposedly some ones in Alaska, but I'll have to double check on that. I just saw something that might suggest that. And what that is extra gravity tug and pull. When our moon is on the backside of the planet at night, we get more energy because we're getting an extra pull of the gravity from the moon uplifting us. And when it's on the other side, we have really energetic days and we sleep really well. But when it's on this side, we have really dragged down days because we have the extra gravity on the backside of Earth. And we have nights to where we're wide awake. So if you, every month you get hard time resting around a full moon and you look outside and whammo, there's a full moon, that explains why. Healthcare workers are well aware of that. So getting back to Tiamat, Tiamat was destroyed by Marduk. Oh, you know, when I talked about Roger Spur, I forgot to mention his information and his groups. He has Mudfossil Research on Facebook, and then Mudfossil University on YouTube, unless he's changed the name. Another person I want to mention, first off, I have the group Titans, Giants, and Mudfossils that deal with a lot of these Titan remains. But another buddy of mine, Arjan Hartman, has a YouTube channel called Age of Disclosure. He has a group called Age of Disclosure, but also a group called Time to Reveal the Real Giants. And I was going to mention him as well. So, Marduk comes in, and it's a planet, okay? And it has its own center star. And it was a lot bigger than this, and it rammed into Tiamat. And when it did that, it destroyed the crust, smacked the center star of Tiamat, and went blasting out the other side. And Tiamat folded inside out. Pieces plunged into the sun. Pieces formed new planets and moons, and some of the moons that are on some of our other planets. Like, I believe that Titan on Jupiter, the ice world, I believe that's what that one is called. And there's another one where pieces and remains of Tiamat. So the Earth, Mars, Mercury, Venus, and some of the moons and on other planets are remnants of Tiamat. The center star is in the asteroid belt, a big chunk of it. It's called 16 Psyche, and it's worth $10,000 quadrillion. Again, $10,000 quadrillion. That's a lot of mineral wealth. And we'll get into that more when we talk about Hollow Nibiru, which is what this is leading into, and the Nephilim, and them sending their hero astronauts here named the Anunnaki to mine gold on Earth when they failed to be able to mine it on the asteroid belt, and they tried blowing open their volcanic surface to create more ash to protect our world, and that failed, which, by the way, Nibiru is mentioned as wormwood in the Bible because of its crater-like, wood plank-like surface that's glowing red, has craters that look like planks of wood, and sooty bands of weather bands that separate it to look like planks of wood. So you're starting to get a picture of that. So anyways, getting back to Tiamat, there's something that I didn't go over in the last video. Although I did go over the height of giants, okay, I didn't explain that very well. In crust natural formation, we have thicker crust at the poles than we do near the equator, and that's because the outside cools faster and the inside is pouring out magma from the inside, and it creates a pressure ridge at the top. And we see that on Mars. We have two craters at the north and south pole filled with ice, and you can look that up right now, okay? And if you look really hard, you'll find polar openings to that. So beings towards the poles are shorter than beings right here because the thinner the crust below the feet, the greater the lift of the gravity up here. So in the book Orpha, there's a drawing, illustration of a man jumping off a cliff and floating to the ground like an ant. Well, if you imagine the size of a center star on Earth and the thinnest crust, a person like me and you that isn't a giant, doesn't have that extra mass and size and weight, will feel almost weightless in certain areas of the Earth. And Olaf Jansen describes this in the book The Smoky God, having full of energy and feeling so young and invigorated during the 2 years he visited Hollow Earth. This is mentioned in the book Journey to the Center of the Earth as the floating rocks the guy hopscotches over. There's also, like I said in a previous video, the planet of the movie Avatar is like a small planet in comparison to the giant planet, and in between are floating mountains because of the gravity difference. And that's the same kind of thing I'm talking about with our moon. It does have a gravity of its own and lifts us up at night. It doesn't lift us off the planet, but if it was much larger, it's possible that we could feel nearly weightless at night. And we do feel a lot less heavy during those nights. That's why we're energetic. We want to go out. We want to party. We want to have fun. So, we went over Marduk and the Red Katchina by the Hopi, and then retreating into the ground and staying with the ant people and coming back out. So, I want to talk about igneous rock, which is granite. A lot of mudfossil researchers think that we are talking about pre-flood when we're talking about titans, which are enormous beings. But like I said, my contention is they were pre-Earth. And this is because when you go with the biblical references, they talk about the Nephilim. Well, the Nephilim were the beings of Nibiru, which I'll get into. And the Anunnaki are those that came here. And the Anunnaki were about 12 foot tall on average. Lived a lot longer because the time dilation on Nibiru, minutes on their planet was days and weeks on Earth. So they lived a lot longer when they came here. And they had 2 rows of teeth, 6 fingers, and 6 toes. And so we'll get into that more when we get into Nibiru. But basically, what we're talking about here is that Titan, or Titans of Tiamat, there were animals and plants and everything on the surface of the earth, not just Titan beings. And the biblical reference is that Anunnaki mated with humans, or Nephilim mated with humans, and then genetically created these monstrous Titan giants, and that's just not true. It's not plausible, okay? They did mate with us and created smarter humans, but humans were also larger back then because they took an existing ape that was similar in stature to them and created a human-like being, later mated with them and made a smarter human pre-flood, which eventually, according to them, decided to let die out when Marduk was passing by and caused the Great Flood / Sumerian deluge. Okay, so that doesn't explain, the biblical reference doesn't explain how we have Titan-sized elephants, Titan-sized animals, Titan-sized trees. We're talking trees with stumps we're finding in needle spurs that suggest 80-mile tall trees. So on Tiamat, the average of the Titans towards the poles was in the 40 to 100 foot range, and the ones near the equator were in a mile to a couple mile tall range, and the ones at the equator we're finding giant ones. Okay, giant ones. It might be up, animals at least, that might be up to 2 or 3 miles tall. And Roger has found on his channel watery dragons that would be in the water in this low gravity that are 500 to 900 miles long. So you'll have to look at his channel to see those. I believe one is in Canada, one is in Africa. I also want to point out Michael Tellinger. And Michael Tellinger found a footprint in South Africa. He calls it the footprint of God. I haven't been able to get a hold of Michael, so I just wanted to throw that information out there. But it's in granite. So when we're talking about granite, when the earth was created of this destruction and the crust folded inside out, we ended up with these titans all over the surface dead and raining down on the planet. And the planet was much smaller, and it was listed in the Sumerian tablets as only being the top portion of Tiamat, that a lot of it was missing, and that our planet only represented part of this Tiamat. So that's another indicator of backing up Zecharia Sitchin, but also backing up what I'm saying here. And so Earth was smaller and covered in water, and anything that was deep in the crust turned really hot and turned into igneous rock, like granite, and fossilized those prints and Titan remains. There were other areas where they were trapped in like a watery area and less heat, and they became like bog bodies and a lot of the red clay creatures that we see. And we see all sizes and representations of these Titan beings on the earth. Now, what was life like in Tiamat? Well, when we take Terry Hagen's picture into account and many other dragons that we found, we find that A, they wear helmets. They're proud to wear helmets. Not all of them did. Okay, there are some that were sleeping and weren't wearing helmets. And that possibly, with Terry Hagen's picture, that they rode dragons. I try to imagine, like kind of like you watch Star Wars and the pod race. I try to imagine a great dragon race around the center star. Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if on that last day, this Titan rider knew that it was last day and took a last flight with his dragon, So also in one of the pictures we see, and I put this in the thumbnail, we see a Titan, and she's embracing her man, and her hand's out of the water on his shoulder. And he's looking at her, and she's looking at him. And on her head, people have thought there's a hat on her head, but you see a disfigured hand and a disfigured body and a child's head pointing up above hers. And I believe that's because she was carrying her child on her shoulders, embracing her man in the final moments. And we see this a lot when we look at Pompeii. We see Pompeii where people were huddled together and holding each other. We're finding Titans that are under blankets. There's one in South America, and recently in Petra, Jordan, Arjan Hartman found one where he's in a sleeping bag, or she's in a sleeping bag. So it's just amazing stuff. And we're talking huge, huge beings, people, that could never have lived on Earth the way Earth is now. So it had to be something else. It had to be different. And it had to have a lot more space and size than what any matter amount of mass and volume we could ever grow to would be to house these great creatures of this awesome size. And that's why I want you to share this video out and share it to people, because I think people deserve to know this history and know that we're living on a planet that's the remains of old Titans, and we mine it, okay? And that we're not alone in this universe. We're not even alone on Earth. We have the ant people here on Earth. And we have the Sky Brothers, the Nephilim, who come back to get gold from the Anunnaki, and now our government that's taken over these burial mounds. As a matter of fact, on Unsolved Mysteries when I was a kid, I picked up all these pieces of information, but there was a guys that stumbled across this mound, and they almost fell into it, and they went down into it and thought they had pig iron, brought it out, and it was all stacks of gold. And at this time in American history, bullion in great amount was illegal to own. I don't know what the whole deal with that was, but that's what Unsolved Mysteries was saying. So they hush tried to get a land grant for that land, but it was really close to the base, and the government declined it and extended the base over that land. They couldn't figure out why these two guys just wanted this piece of land so badly right next to the Air Force Base. So it was access denied. They covered it. They covered it over. I don't know what number that was in the series. It's the only one that I remember, other than one that was about a flight over at the Atlantic where a plane pilot had traveled through a storm and came out the other side faster than what he normally should have and cut his flight time down. That may have been in that series or another similar series like it. So please, my stars, share this, like this, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Also, I'm now adding a link that's to my PayPal. All right, if you feel so inclined to help, that would be great. That will get me off of this board some more and onto a computer and getting my internet back, getting a new laptop. And so that would be wonderful. So anybody that wants to help support, that link will be in the description and top comment. And also I still have Messenger Pay. And to date, since 2012, I've never received a dime for this. I'm not trying to make this a pay-for project, but those things would help with those things that I just can't afford right now. So please share this freely, and you have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in. Peace, guys.